Newsnight, Maryland is made possible in part on MPT by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, whose annual report on the conditions of children, Kids Count, can be found online at www.aecf.org.
Who should decide when you're too old to drive? Plus, student solutions for stopping school violence. And a century-old hospital gets ready to close its doors.
This is Newsnight, Maryland.
Good evening, everyone. Traffic deaths are at a record low. Officials say tougher drunk driving laws, a crackdown on road rage, better highways, and safer cars are the reasons.
But there is one negative trend, an increase in deadly accidents among drivers aged 70 and older. A comprehensive project is underway in Maryland to identify drivers at risk and develop ways to help them drive more safely. Newsnight Maryland correspondent Yolanda Vasquez has more on senior drivers in tonight's Maryland Life.
If you're in need of renewing your license and you're over the age of 55,
now the first exercise will allow you to practice touching the screen.
You may be asked to participate in a research study that will help identify some of the problems facing older drivers.
We're here not to take away licenses at MVA. We're here to help people stay on the road for as long as they're safe.
Dr. Robert Raleigh is the director of the Driver Research Safety Project, which involves more than 30 different organizations. It's the first research effort of its kind in the country, and if all goes well, the project may be duplicated in other states.
Right now, there's no other concerted effort like this that's putting everything together.
Dr. Raleigh believes that now is the time to gather as much information as possible in regards to older drivers, because in 10 years, the first baby boomers will turn 65.
At this point in time, 1 in 8 drivers is over 65. That's roughly 13% of our driving population. In 2025, it'll be 1 in 5 drivers will be over the age of 65. That puts it up in somewhere between 20 and 25% of drivers will be over the age of 65.
One, you're going to do one.
I hit 1.
To A.
One of the primary goals of the project is to identify and assess the ability of older drivers. A battery of tests are given to the volunteers, checking everything from their physical capability to their memory skills.
I will be watching your trail, so you can call this out to me as you go along. You're going to begin.
One test in particular requires the individual to connect letters and numbers in a chronological order.
These letters and numbers are scattered over a piece of paper. That's a very good test to test memory, perception, and scanning ability.
Since November of last year, more than 2,000 volunteers have participated in the study. Researchers think they have enough data now to wrap up the testing phase, but they will continue to monitor all of the volunteers' driving records.
And what we will do then is we will follow that group of people, looking at violations that may occur in the future, looking at crashes that may occur in the future, and then we can look at our test and see were the tests predictive of those events that occurred.
The number of older drivers involved in fatal accidents increased by 33% between 1988 and 1998. With the results of these tests, Dr. Raleigh is hoping that they can identify those drivers who no longer belong on the road, thereby reducing the number of crashes.
If you eliminate or prevent crashes, you reduce health care costs, you reduce disability, you reduce fatalities, and that impact on the health care system is a significant one.
When many older drivers reach a certain age or have difficulty seeing, they often self-restrict, taking themselves off the road to avoid any problems. But for those who are in denial, giving up the wheel means giving up their independence.
Where can you go without a car nowadays?
Marsha Weidenhammer visits the Reisterstown Senior Center almost every week. Like many of her peers, she's thankful that she can get up and go whenever she wants.
Do you think it would ever come to a point where you might have to restrict your driving, where you may have to curb back and maybe drive only like within a 10-mile radius?
Maybe someday, but I hope not.
That time has already come for Connie Coyle. The 83-year-old lost her sight in one of her eyes and had to give up driving.
It was a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to drive. And it's a terrible thing not to drive, to have to depend on people.
Our society has sort of made the automobile the thing, and independence comes with having an automobile and driving.
One of the other major goals of the project is to develop mobility alternatives for those who can no longer drive. The Mass Transit Administration is looking into ways to expand services for seniors. But it's going to take a group effort, Dr. Raleigh says, to improve the safety skills of seniors.
It's a big problem, and it takes everybody working together to make it happen.
In Baltimore, Yolanda Vasquez, Newsnight, Maryland.
Joining us in the studio now are Julie Rochman of the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, Katie Smith-Sloan of the American Association of Retired Persons, and Dr. Robert Raleigh of the Motor Vehicle Administration. You can call us with a question or comment. The number is going to be on the screen. Dr. Raleigh, how did the idea for this study come up in the first place?
The study came as a result of us on the Medical Advisory Board seeing people who we had to evaluate relative to their ability to drive safely. And it became apparent that we saw a fair number of older people who, through functional changes, were having difficulty, whether it be with memory or physical capability or visual apparatus. And as a result of that, we thought we should start to try to study what some of the tests might be that would be useful to identify those, to assess them, and to get them in some form of remediation. So last year, we started a year-long study collecting data on people renewing their license. That volunteering to be part of the study has no effect on their licensing. It's purely an opportunity for us to develop data and to study it and follow it over time to determine the validity and usefulness of the test.
Now, have you reached the point where you feel you've collected enough data and now it's a matter of tracking?
The first phase of our collection is done with this particular group. We're going to follow them for a couple of years. There's some other aspects of testing that we're going to be working on. One of them is the useful field of view, and that will go on for another year or so.
Ms. Rochman, what do you think? What does the Institute think about the idea of screening elderly drivers or testing them?
Well, at this point in time, there isn't a particular test that all researchers can agree has a lot of predictive ability. In other words, we don't know that there's a singular vision test or driving test or other sort of capabilities assessment that's going to be very correct and on target all the time to tell us who's going to be in a crash later on. So as people are trying out different tests and more field tests are being conducted, we're very curious to see what happens. We want to be sure that we're catching people who are indeed high-risk drivers, but not casting the net so wide that we're restricting the driving of people who don't need to have their driving restricted.
Ms. Sloan, what's the AARP's position on that?
Well, AARP is very interested in improving the safety of roads for people of all ages. And we think drivers should be tested regularly throughout their driving career. We're very interested in what's going on in Maryland. We're very anxious to see if, in fact, we can come up with a test that will predict unsafe drivers. But we think we ought to be applying those tests to drivers of all ages.
So you don't think that they're necessarily, by virtue of biology and a person's age, that there necessarily is some point where the demand for some kind of screening is more necessary?
Well, certainly people's bodies change as they age, and there are changes in their physical ability and changes in dexterity and mobility. But nobody ages it the same way. Aging is a process, and nobody is the same at any given age as another individual.
Let's take a call now. Zoya is on the line from Fairfax County, Virginia. Hello.
Hi. Both my husband and I have been hit by, senior citizens. One was a really bad accident, and every day I see it. That there's just inaccurate driving, just inaccuracy, and I think we all should take that upon ourselves to be tested once in a while and be sure that we are safe, and regardless of our age, especially when we're older.
Sort of backs up what you were just saying.
I would completely agree with you.
How does the insurance industry as a whole regard the risk factors for elderly drivers as compared with the other age groups?
Well, we know that driving risk in terms of crash involvement, particularly fatal crash involvement, goes way up after about age 70. Drivers at that point in time are involved in more fatal crashes per mile driven than any other age group except for teenagers. The question is, are they involved in fatalities and are they dying as a result of their ability changing or of their fragility, meaning are they more likely to die of injuries sustained in a crash than a younger person? And until we can separate out those two things, ability from fragility, there's going to be a lot of challenges for us in determining what causes an older person to die in a crash.
Dr. Raleigh, what kinds of things physiologically affect a person's driving ability as they get older?
Well, vision certainly changes with age. Illnesses such as glaucoma and cataracts and macular degeneration all have an effect on one's ability to see and perceive and register a signal that helps you drive safely. Physical capabilities, certainly your muscle flexibility in your neck and your ability to turn and observe traffic coming from the side. The cognitive changes that occur in some people are really the most difficult, because for cognitive or memory changes with the dementias like Alzheimer's, people really are not aware of those changes that have these illnesses, and therefore it's a very tough job for them to accept their impairment. It's tough for the families that have to deal with it, and as a matter of fact, we've just developed a brochure with the Alzheimer's Association that identifies ways the family and the doctor and MVA all work together.
But you don't have to take it to the so far as the Alzheimer's or even or the dementia aspect of it. Just isn't there just a sort of natural slope, a decline in cognitive ability as one gets older?
Yes, there is, but you know it isn't always sufficient to be of any significance in terms of daily functioning or in terms of driving.
Lemuel is on the line from Baltimore City. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. I am trying to decide or trying to get a question answered here. You say that the older people are the ones that create and cause most of the problems. How about these young people are 16 and up to about 25 or 30 years old? They create more problems out here than a little bit. I know I drive practically every day, and there are people, little ones, young ones, cutting in front of me, taking off and doing all sorts of things. What happens with them? I mean, you're trying to get details for the seniors. Why not details for the younger ones?
Yeah, thank you. I saw some nodding heads in here.
Can I
Sure.
take a crack at that one, Bob? Well, Lemuel, let me tell you that Maryland is among the states that are actually doing wonderful things with respect to younger drivers. We have a brand new law here that's called graduated licensing. And what it does is it keeps a younger driver in the licensing system so that they can gain some experience in driving in some relatively low-risk situations, prohibits nighttime driving, for example. It's a three-step licensing process, and graduated licensing is showing a lot of promise in this country and in other countries in reducing teen involvement in crashes. The reason we restrict younger drivers is because they don't restrict themselves. They think they're invincible, they think they're invulnerable, they're never going to make a mistake, and we know they will. So we restrict them as a group because we can't tell who the bad actors are going to be. With older drivers, we have almost the opposite problem, and that is that they will restrict themselves to a point. If they're not comfortable driving at night, they won't drive at night, et cetera, et cetera. But again, there's a physical ability change there that we still have to deal with. Older drivers have problems at intersections, for example. They're over-involved in intersection, multiple vehicle crashes, because there's a lot of information to process, whereas younger drivers are over-involved in single vehicle crashes, often involving speed, running off the road. So what the doctor is doing and other people doing around the country is trying to take the differences in ability and performance and come up with some solutions for older drivers the same way that we think graduate licensing is a solution for younger drivers.
I want to follow up on that in just a minute. Daryl from Wacomico County is on the line. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome.
I feel threatened when you start pointing towards older drivers, since I'm over 55 years old. But I do realize that there's a concern for for people who get older. In fact, it should be a concern for all people, I would think. In the respect that I would think if you were going to look at older drivers and say we should be retested or so forth, why not, and so it doesn't seem like you're pointing towards age, why not say all drivers should be retested every 5 years? Or we look at all drivers. That way us seniors, or when I'm going to be a senior soon, I won't feel as threatened. And then if you do see that I'm having a problem, I recognize it. And I'll try to do something about it. But to come after me for my age, it really threatens me.
How about that, Ms. Sloan?
Daryl, I would agree with you completely. And I think the key here is to find the kinds of tests that will really be effective to identify people who may be unsafe drivers, tests that go beyond vision tests.
What's the AARP's 55 Alive program about? What's in it?
55 Alive is a driver re-education program. It's a classroom program providing instruction in the rules of the road. Today's older drivers largely didn't attend formal driver education programs when they first got their license. And this is an opportunity for them to get back in the classroom and refresh their knowledge. And
what kind of response have you gotten from it?
We reach millions of people a year with 55 Alive in courses all over the country.
William from Montgomery County, hello.
Hello. I'm 80 in April, and I'm still driving, and I've had to evaluate my driving. I found that I was having back-end accidents, and I discovered that I was dozing. And I found that by adjusting both my time and my use of
the time when you're using the car?
Well, the time I was using the car, but also the beverages. So that I would have a beverage before I drove that had some
caffeine or something in it.
Some caffeine in it.
Yeah, and that helped?
Helped a lot.
Did it?
I haven't had an accident occasion in the last 4 years now.
Way to go, William. Thank you for calling.
But you need...
What's in the test? That what kind of questions, what kind of challenges do you do in the test?
The tests are made up of first one's physical capabilities, such as walking, reaction time for moving the foot from accelerator to brake, neck flexibility. We check immediate and delayed memory. Then we do a test called the motor-free visual perception test, which requires one identifying a geometric figure that's completed at the top of the page and broken lines at the bottom, and how does this, which one of the four diagrams will look like the diagram on the top. We do scanning tests that help us determine one's ability to logically scan a group of common symbols. And we do the Trails A and B test that you saw early, which is another perceptual cognitive test, and finally the useful field of vision. That covers the full range of physical, mental, and cognitive needs to be a safe driver.
Paul from Montgomery County. Hello, Paul. Paul, are you there?
Hello.
Hi.
It was Carroll County.
Carroll County, excuse me.
I'm 71 white, and I've been driving for 55 years, and I'm wondering if the statistics show that it happens mostly on beltways, on city streets. Why couldn't you restrict people from driving? They can drive in the country around Westminster here, but they can't drive in the city. I would never drive to the airport now for love or money.
It takes a lot of younger people feel the same way about that. What is the insurance industry? Oh, go ahead, Doug.
I would like to comment because, in fact, as we pick up people who may have some impairments, and we're concerned about those very issues of expressway and urban driving, we test them in those geographic areas around their home, and if they can drive safely in those areas, we give them a restricted license for 5 miles or a 10-mile radius, so that in fact we are trying to do that.
Is there anything involved in insurance rates or anything in terms of how far a person's driving or anything like that?
Well, when you get an insurance policy, they ask you about how many miles a year you drive, and that does go into your rate. But I think, going back to the question, What we know about older drivers is there are particular driving situations in which they have problem. Again, left turns are a very difficult situation. About half of all fatal crashes involving 80-year-old drivers involve multiple vehicle crashes at intersections, compared to only about a quarter of the crashes involving drivers up to age 50. What we think is happening is there's so much going on, it's a lot to process. Now, there are engineering changes that we can make to intersections that will help older drivers, that will help everybody.
Name a couple if you
A couple, a dedicated left turn lane, even better, a protected left turn, meaning that the traffic in the other direction is stopped while you're making the left turn. An all red phase at the intersection where the light is red in all directions for about 3 seconds, which allows the older driver just a little bit more time to gather the information they need and to clear the intersection of anybody who might cause a potential conflict.
Let me try to...
So these are engineering changes that would be great for drivers of all ages.
What about bigger print on the signs?
Absolutely. Signage and less signage, just less confusing signage.
Yeah. Let me get one more call in. Lisa from Harford County. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. I'm concerned about the elderly whose licenses are, say, restricted, and those that don't have family. What type of services could the counties provide for the elderly that don't have family, that are restricted, that, you know, just need to go to a store that may be further than what they're restricted in the rural areas?
Yeah, because this is a tremendous change in terms of personal freedom when someone can't do that.
Well, in rural areas, it is a huge problem to find transportation. In suburban and urban areas, there is public transportation. There's paratransit, there's taxi service, there's scheduled and unscheduled transportation services, but there isn't necessarily enough of that. I think we need to really take a hard look at that, both in Maryland and in other states, and figure out what it is we need to do.
What do you think about that, Doctor? Very briefly.
Mobility alternatives is clearly one of the major concerns as we come to understand impairments, come to understand remediation, and ultimately some people do have to stop driving. And to find an alternative is really one of the big issues for the Maryland Consortium in terms of how we go about trying to solve the total state program.
I want to thank you all very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Bob.
For more information on the AARP's 55 Alive program, you can call 1-888-227-7669. Next Monday on Maryland Life, mandatory school uniforms. Is it a good idea? Could it make your child's school any safer?
And speaking of safety, stopping violence in schools. Coming up later on Newsnight Maryland, students offer their solutions to this widespread problem. But first, a local hospital is about to close its doors for the final time after 140 years of service. Jeff Salkin has the story in tonight's Maryland Biz. Don't go away.
Some council members in Washington, D.C. want to ban the breeding, sale, and ownership of pit bulls in the district. Residents who currently own pit bulls could keep them, but would be required to have the animals spayed or neutered. Maryland officials say 302 state public schools will share $750,000 of technology grants. The money will be used for wiring classrooms, purchasing hardware and software, and training for teachers. You may want to confirm your flight if you're flying on U.S. Airways during the holidays. Flight attendants are threatening to go on strike. The union says it won't give U.S. Airways any warning once the 30-day cooling-off period ends.
Get ready to join the chase. This group of enthusiastic beaglers and their band of feisty beagles are hunting for the white cottontail rabbit. But in this hunt, the excitement's in the chase, not the kill.
Nobody wants anything to happen to that bunny. We want that bunny to have more bunnies.
Tag along with one of the best beagle tracking packs in the country. It's all on the next Outdoors Maryland, an MPT production. Thursday night at 8.
A 142-year-old Baltimore hospital enters its last month in business, and hundreds of employees are still unsure of their fate.
Jeff Salkin has more in tonight's Maryland Biz.
Church Hospital will close its doors by the end of the month. Its affiliated nursing home will shut down early next year. Altogether, there are 800 employees at Church, and more than 600 of them could lose their jobs. The parent company, MedStar Health, has offered new positions to 180 people so far at its 6 other area hospitals. MedStar officials say they have not received a formal proposal from a doctors group that was organizing to try to save the facility. Church Home and Hospital lost more than $3 million last year. Maryland's biggest law firm has agreed to merge with a Chicago practice. Piper & Marbury's partners agreed over the weekend to merge with Rudnick & Wolf to create the nation's 11th largest law firm. The combined operation will have more than 750 lawyers. And the sun was shining a little brighter in Anne Arundel County today after a solar energy company decided to move its headquarters there. The Baltimore Business Journal reports today that Frederick-based SolarX has chosen space in a new building near BWI Airport. Between 25 and 30 employees will make the move in January. SolarX will keep its manufacturing operations at the distinctive building off Interstate 70 in Frederick. SolarX does business internationally, and according to the Anne Arundel County Economic Development Organization, the access to BWI was a key point of the company's decision to move its headquarters there. And Camilla, that is today's Maryland Biz.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Stopping school violence was the theme of a day-long conference in Baltimore County today. This time, though, the majority of those attending were not state and community leaders, but those most directly affected by violence in schools, the students themselves. They came from large schools in large cities, small schools in small towns. 600 students from all over Maryland bound by a common goal, stopping school violence.
I think this is really what needed to happen all along. I think this is really where the answers are going to come from. I think the problems probably stem from families and from teachers not being there and administrators being too harsh and students feeling like they couldn't communicate.
Solutions for reducing school violence range from peer mediation to building self-respect to better communication among students, teachers, and administrators.
The greatest thing that we can do, you all think, is to have speak out groups or to have communication.
Not everybody will be able to speak, at like the one meeting. And if we want everybody to be able to voice their opinion and what they think, we should have, several meetings.
Today's summit was prompted by student focus groups in May and June.
They wanted to have educators, parents, other adults listen to their ideas because they are concerned that there are problems in their schools and no one is listening to how they think we ought to be addressing those concerns.
Among today's speakers, Lieutenant Governor Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, who told students the state would provide individual mini grants of $5,000 to help implement their plans for stopping school violence. Also on hand, Dr. Jane Hammond, school superintendent of the county in Colorado that includes Columbine High School.
In fact, less than 1% of the violent deaths of youth happen in schools, but that's too much. And we need to work together as a total community, not just in our schools, but how people treat each other and how do we create that community of security and safety.
Perhaps one of the most impressive moments in this summit took place when every student here stood up and took a pledge against handgun violence.
I will never bring a gun to school.
I will never bring a gun to school.
And I think this is the first step in showing the rest of our nation that students are here in the forefront wanting to help each other.
I hope to unite all my students and have us working together as one against violence.
And following today's summit, the students go back to school to come up with an action plan. They implement it. And then next spring, there's going to be another summit to discuss just how successful those plans were in curbing school violence.
Thanks for watching tonight. Tomorrow on Newsnight Maryland, AIDS in Maryland. Why isn't it declining as fast in this state as it is across the country?
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
To purchase cassettes of Newsnight Maryland, call 1-800-873-6154. Tell us the date of the program you wish to purchase. Cassettes are $19.95 plus shipping and tax. Newsnight Maryland is made possible in part on MPT by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, committed to supporting public awareness of ideas and programs that work for children and families.